The market is continually rising, marking historic highs, but there are some stocks doing the opposite, notably Apple.
Why has Apple recently fallen?
It's due to an antitrust lawsuit.
The US government has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Apple's iPhone, which analysts say is similar to the lawsuit that nearly split Microsoft 25 years ago. As a result, Apple's stock price fell by 4% in one day on Thursday. As of the close on March 21st, the market cap gap between Apple and Nvidia has narrowed to 15% again.
I believe antitrust lawsuits are always a presence for big tech companies.
Especially since Tim Cook's recent visit to China has only brought bad news, possibly due to the backlash there. Personally, I don't think an antitrust lawsuit significantly devalues a monopoly's worth because lobbying is legal in the US, and it has a history of overcoming numerous antitrust laws. Especially, weakening a symbolic company like Apple with antitrust laws would not be the picture the US wants to paint.
So today, let's analyze Apple's biggest risk.
The biggest problem for Apple is that its sales have stagnated. You can see that the sales in 2023 have declined compared to 2022, as has the operating profit. Growth stocks are not showing growth. Indeed, Apple's current P/E ratio is 27, higher than the S&P 500's P/E ratio of 23, indicating higher expectations. However, many believe the current P/E ratio is high since sales are declining. The main reason for this decline is probably the regional sales of Apple, which are generally decreasing. However, since the economy was bad in 2023 and inflation was high, it's expected that smartphone sales might not rebound until this year. However, there are regions expected to worsen this year, notably China. China accounts for 18.9% of Apple's sales, making it the third largest market. The reason China is regulating iPhones is because of the United States. As the US started to regulate semiconductors, it began to check China, and China started to annoy the US in other ways since it couldn't regulate semiconductors. Not only that, but the US has continued to confront China by moving forward with the TikTok ban bill. This data is from the smartphone market share in China, comparing early 2023 and early 2024. Except for Oppo, iPhone sales plummeted by 24%.
Although the entire Chinese market fell by 7%, the decline was significantly larger. The decline rate made it the second worst performer. Until early last year, it was the #1 company in China, but now it has fallen to third place. Not just the China risk, but people are not changing their smartphones. Unlike in the past, consumers are not switching their smartphones as frequently. According to data from February 2024, the proportion of people who changed their smartphones has significantly increased for the first time in 4 years since 2019, currently holding the highest proportion. This is a significant hit to Apple, which relies on iPhone sales for 50% of its revenue. However, Apple is improving in one area: its services sector. Apple's services sector continues to be dominant and is the only business area that has increased compared to 2022. Interestingly, the margin in the services sector is about 71%, which is about twice as high as the 36% margin from traditional hardware sales. Have you heard this news? Among teenagers, owning an iPhone has become a given, and it has become an item that gives them a sense of belonging.
In the US and Korea, most teenagers use iPhones. In short, today's teenagers are potential future customers for Apple. But it's not just teenagers. iPhone customers are increasing elsewhere. In 2023, Apple CEO Tim Cook visited India. This was because of the opening of the first Apple Store in India.
The reason Tim Cook visited India is that sales there are soaring.
India is the region with the highest potential for growth in the smartphone market in the world. Ultimately, Apple is trying to make up for the sales in China with sales in India. The smartphone penetration rate in India is in the early 50%, meaning there is a huge potential customer base. Indeed, Apple's largest partner, Taiwan's Foxconn, has built an iPhone manufacturing plant in India and has increased the production of iPhones in India starting with the iPhone 14. Vision Pro is also expected to become a new source of revenue for Apple. This data is from the Financial Times, analyzing the expected sales of Apple Vision Pro in the future. This year, 350,000 units are expected to be sold, 1.48 million units next year,
and 126.1 million units by the 5th year. Assuming it sells like the 5th year, Apple's revenue could increase by about $44 million, accounting for about 11% of the 2023 revenue. Additionally, the service costs that will occur are expected to be significant. And Apple still has high hopes for China. Despite the news of Tim Cook's visit, Chinese people still like iPhones. Even though they can't show it because of government regulations, they are surely thinking about iPhones. Additionally, since Apple has invested a lot of money in the Chinese government over the years, I believe it will employ various methods to solve the China risk. For now, whether the China risk will be long-term should be closely watched based on Apple's forthcoming performance announcements. I believe in Apple. Meta was said to be doomed, but now it has risen more than 5 times compared to before. And Nvidia, which had fallen to $100, was predicted by many to not exceed $200 for years. However, in the end, they all rose significantly. I think there's no need to worry about big tech. Please take my video as a reference only.